first of all, I would like to ask like if there are some like front-end developers here because I'm not completely sure. So 1, 2, not so many. So maybe not like the best audience, but at least you get like an overview like with what kind of things we are struggling there, like with many developers and so on. Because as was said previously, so in Mobiliar many things are added, but nothing is usually like taken away. So that's very similar also like with the front-end technology. So there was like AngularJS, this huge portal, MCS, V2E portal, and now okay, we try to like modularize it into the multiple independent applications and to improve the performance, maintainability and everything, and plus to add Angular, which is like this new incompatible version of AngularJS basically. So like AngularJS is 1x and then 2+ is all Angular. And this brings with itself its own challenges because Angular, like the way you implement things is different. And again, like it takes time until people realize how to do these things right, and like the new technologies, the new way of handling asynchronous calls and so on and so on. So, and what we've seen in the multiple projects, we have more than now 45 single-page applications. There were some recurrent patterns or anti-patterns of what people are doing. So, and we would like to, or I would like to go through a couple of them. So maybe in your team or in your project or whatever, maybe if you see something like this, you can like maybe give them like some advice or like help them or review their code or whatever it is. So yeah, we'll get to those anti-patterns later, to everything individually, but basically people use getters in the components implementation, like to get the derived data, which has a very bad performance implications. Then people don't really understand RxJS, which is kind of this asynchronous library which is used in new Angular, which compared to promises can have 0 to n different like response values. So promises always had like 0 or 1. So people kind of try to use the patterns they were using with promises in the observables with RxJS, and that doesn't really match well. So the general understanding of asynchronous operations, so we found like some really weird examples in codebase, which I mean that's like on the JavaScript level, so that to understand what the callback does. So that's a bit like worrying, I would say. Then the project structure, which is like already since 4 or 5 years, like every application usually is structured based on feature and not based on like entity type. So it's not like all the 100 services together and all the 500 components together, but like per feature. And another thing which I just called like copy-paste development, which is now very critical during the migration from AngularJS to Angular, where people try to migrate some features and then they just kind of take it and don't really think how it would be implemented in the new world. And I have there some examples of what this leads to. So as an introduction, so basically, what is the problem with this anti-pattern? So what we strive for in this front-end area with all these 45 applications is to increase the performance by splitting it into smaller, more manageable chunks of code. The same goes with the maintainability, and that's like the modularization. So of course, when there was this like one huge portal like with hundreds of screens and thousands of lines of code, and it was like heavy and it took forever to build and like test and everything, that was a big problem. So there is this initiative, okay, let's split it into 40 plus more application. Of course, just has to be simpler, has to take shorter, has to be better. But the problem is we are doing it kinda together with the migration from AngularJS to Angular, and that brings its own problems, because now we have like this hybrid application which still kinda reuse the old code, but we also want to write the new code. And then of course like the hybridization has its own cost, how we propagate the change detection from one part to another, routing from one part to another. Maybe we need to use the new components written in the new world in the old old templates, and like the old services in the new, and so on and so on. How do we move forward? So this again, if it was just the modularization, that would be much easier. But if it's this plus this together, and plus then using of new Angular brings with itself new technologies like RxJS, I mean, it's not the craziest thing ever, but of course, if you never seen it, it takes a month or two until you get used to it, until you figure out like these rough edges, until you like adjust your mindset, how to do these things, like what do I want to achieve, what is the best way, the simplest way to achieve it. So this takes time, of course, and for us, it's kind of all these things happening together, which makes it even more challenging, like for the developers in the feature teams. So and this leads to basically creation of, which we can call like instant legacy, this code which is created, it really has problems on many levels, let's put it that way. So we should really try to like raise awareness, like for example with the job team we are writing like a blog post, we have the NG Force where like the representatives from the other teams are coming like once a week, where we try to speak about these topics and like spread the awareness and try to like even review their code and so on, but it's just too much. But yeah, just to be aware of these things. So the first topic is like the getter's performance. So that was like basically we found about this just by random when we were like reviewing some library which is used actually everywhere. It has some components which are heavily dependent on the getters. So getter is kind of the same as in Java. So but also in JavaScript you can define a getter which is like when you are trying to access the property of an object or like, yeah, of the object, then you can implement there some like custom functionality which will be called on every access to that property. So this is sometimes okay if it's like something minimal, but then we saw that basically people implemented quite a lot in those getters, and that gets problematic.
Do you mean instead of just reading the property, you're calculating the property?
Exactly. And the problem, this is sometimes valid. We sometimes want a derived data, but the problem comes like with the Angular change detection, which executes getter like needs to get the value on every tick, but actually it doesn't change on every tick, and then we get like thousands and thousands of nested executions of stuff which were completely unnecessary. So I will have some examples. So basically, so this is a getter. So if you have like an Angular component, it has like, okay, selector, some template, and in this template we are like accessing the property of the component which is not defined normally but as a getter, and in that getter like we are calculating a random number which is expensive, let's say. So this in itself is not a problem. Maybe we need to do this, but do we need to do this on every application change detection tick? That's a problem. So basically using getters is kind of the same as using a function call in a template. So as you can see here, so that's almost the same thing, and this was well known since many years that that's like a performance anti-pattern even in AngularJS, but now it's getter, so it looks differently, so people are like not aware that that's not the best thing to do. So and I mean people are trying to solve like some valid use case. They have component had some input, so the parent component sends some data, some object from outside, and they need to, based on that object, calculate some derived data. It can be simple, it can be more complicated. I know in that particular case which we are dealing with, there was like some customer info, whatever, and they need to show some stuff in the tile, okay. But basically it's all about like calculating the derived data. And okay, so this would be the implementation with the getter. So anytime application change detection run, this will be executed. And of course, if it's something like this will be very simple. But if suddenly we are allocating like 5 variables and do 3 service calls and like something async, then that's a problem. Which also leads then people have like this kind of very famous problem, like the expression changed after change detection. If they do something more fancy in a getter, of course, during the change detection they will set something, and that doesn't make sense. It should not happen together. So yeah, they try to get the derived data, and it's problematic. So here comes like, why is this a problem? Because yeah, if Angular just detect changes once a second, all right, like maybe that's the normal rate of doing stuff, but it's much more than that. So as you said, like stuff like scrolling, clicking, anything, any async stuff which happens because Angular patches like set timeout, HTML HTTP request, any async stuff triggers like zone change detection, and because of that also triggers the old AngularJS digest change detection. So also in the templates, like any bound, even like click scroll, yes, exactly. Or for every change detection execution by the change detector, which is, for example, when you use async pipe, which is very common in Angular code base, which actually is a very performant thing, but altogether it's a problem. So then we tried to like actually refactor that problematic component. There were like many of them. We refactored one. We created a pull request for the team. So with a huge description. So okay, this is problematic. This will have a big performance impact because it's used everywhere. Please have a look at this. This does exactly the same as what you implemented, and just please take it and use it in whole of your library. That would be great. And they were like, yeah, but no, like this is not bad. Like it's actually good, and it will be only ever used in a component like parent component which has like on push change detection, which you cannot guarantee. First of all, like you don't know where somebody uses it. You have no control of how somebody uses your code. But second of all, it doesn't really help completely. So as we can see in this diagram, so if you have like multiple, like some hierarchical structure of our application, the component tree, then okay, if one of those parents is on push, it does isolate the change detection from rest of the application, but still that parent usually doesn't have one component. It's usually some view with many components, with who knows what's happening, and all that inside will still trigger every getter on every change detection, and in theory maybe even in loop, because who knows what the getters are doing, like they will have a side effects. So it's not really an answer, and it doesn't really help, and you cannot really depend on it because you don't know how people will use your components. So how can we actually get this derived data in a proper way which doesn't destroy the performance? So Angular actually comes with the onChanges component application, like lifecycle hook, which as we can see here is like this input. So it's this situation when the parent is putting like some data into the child component through the attributes in the template. So this is implemented always with the input, and every change to input will trigger this lifecycle hook, but only at the time when the input changes. So that's great, because that's exactly the place when actually the derived data could change in the first place. So all the other executions and getters are for nothing. We'll always recalculate the same value. But if the input changes, of course the derived data will change too. So, and this is exactly how it was meant to be used. And of course it's like one lifecycle hook, so their argument was that okay, but like then these hooks will get like too big, like there will be too much logic. But I mean, we can extract this logic into the component methods or into service methods or whatever it is, whatever we need to do. It can be like 1, 2, 3, or just one. It can be a wrapper, so that's not really a problem. So please, whenever people need derived data in the components, use onChanges lifecycle hook. So exactly, it only recalculates data when the input changes, and it works great with also the default change detection strategy, which we generally use here in Mobiliar. We don't use on push because we don't use like some state stores or anything like this, or at least not now. So we use the normal change detection. So whenever input changes, this lifecycle hook is evaluated and the component is rendered, and that's what we want. And it's pretty performant. I have here a small live demo of this. So this one is with the getters. So the situation, like we don't have to focus on the code right now, but basically, okay, so this is this view component which just calculates like something random. So we see whenever there is like a change detection tick, we will get another number. So here is the application. We don't really need to read this, I will explain everything. So there is like this kind of like wrapper app component. As you can see, they have like borders, like they are nested in each other. Then there is like this container component, like the parent. And then there is this view component, and this red text here, as you can see, the number changes all the time. So this means that the getter was executed. So why was getter executed? So first of all, we do like some async operations in parents. So in this parent, like in the application whole and also in the parent, we do some async processing with the RxJS. So anytime something happens there, it triggers the change detection, which executes the getter, and this is why we get another number. Plus, if we do any kind of like event handling in our template and start clicking, it starts changing even faster. So any click anywhere, like in any ancestor of that component which uses getter, will call this getter. And if this getter calls another like 5 services and allocates variables to be just thrown away 3 times a second with some objects in them and so on and so on, not the best thing. Okay, so what about this on push? What if the parent was on push? Let's put it on push.
Quick question.
Yes, please.
With a debug proxy, you could see this kind of mass execution then of those calls, isn't it?
In the width,
In a kind of debug proxy, you know?
Is
When
it-
you
is
see
it
all the
debugging
calls
as well?
between the browser and the backend, there you
Okay.
would see an explosion of those calls, isn't
could
it?
be. Yeah, I'm not necessarily. That's like internal, like front-end application stuff. It may or may not trigger backend calls.
Okay, it's
It
not
may or-
necessarily related to that.
So actually, I've seen the getter who actually did trigger backend calls, and that's like really bad.
That's then that's
I did see such a getter. Yeah.
Yes.
So not necessarily every single one of them, but I seen a getter which like created like observable stream and did a backend call. So yeah, it exists. So just get back to this. So okay, we say okay, the parent is on push. So basically, it ticks much less because it only ticks when the parent ticks. And if I here trigger events in the application, we are kind of isolated. But still, whenever the parent has any icing or any event in the parent, it will change the number. So the getters get executed. So this is not what we want. So what we want is to use ng on changes. It's the similar situation. But now our component, instead of like having a getter, has a onChanges hook, which stores the value of the component, which is alright. Then this value is used somewhere in the template. It's not very well highlighted, but basically here is used in the random value. So as we can see, application is ticking, so the change detection is running, but the random number stays the same. So it's the getter is not executed. The same if I trigger event, nothing happens. Trigger event, nothing happens. Only if I change the input, will the random number will recalculate it. So that's exactly what we want. So yeah, we've written a blog post about it. We will probably speak about this on ng-force, and just generally, if you see it in your team or wherever, just please make sure that people don't use getters, because you know, one component, okay, 2, okay, 20, maybe 100, you know, when it starts, and like the components are used multiple times, and maybe the getter does like something crazy, like backend call, because it's just like get toggle, no? Like who knows how this is? Is it cached? Who knows? Maybe it's sync. Who knows? But it's not. So just stay away from getters. We don't need them. So that was like a big thing, and I hope that this team will do something with it. So the next big topic is the RxJS understanding. So RxJS is like, I mean, it also exists like Rx Java, probably also Rx Kotlin and whatever. So it's basically about the observable streams. So the difference between this and some other stuff is that like async task or like async processing in frontend was usually previously just with callback. So I make a request, whenever it's done, the callback is executed, I either got a response or an error. Okay, good. Then we get the promises. So instead of like having callback, it was kind of like a value which will resolve in a value or in an error. So that was nice, but always only for one value. And now what we have is like kind of like a stream of asynchronous values. So it also solves this situation when you only get like one value or error, or like multiple or zero. So it's kind of like the most flexible solution is in like kind of core of the Angular. It's very nice and very powerful once you like learn how to work with it. So implementing stuff like debouncing of the inputs, like this backspacing what we've seen before. That's like you can do it like very easily, this kind of like debouncing operations and buffering and whatever. So that's pretty nice. But it's a new thing, and it will take time until people learn it properly. So, and then comes like the confusion. So what we've seen very often is, so first of all, oh pardon, I didn't do it full screen. Yeah. So we have a stream that's like a value, and then we can like pipe some operator on this stream. And people are compelled to add like operators which do nothing, just so that they can use operator which actually does something. This comes like from this convention that when you like subscribe to this value, you have to provide handler for like the next value, for the error, and only then you can provide the handler for the completion event. So, but that's not the case with the pipe. That's like subscription and pipe is something completely else. One is just like with the pipe you just like declaratively show what kind of stream and process on the stream you want to have. Subscription is to execute the stream. So people write this code sometimes maybe 6 times under, like for every handler or something like this. It's not necessarily a huge performance problem, but you know, it clutters the code base and it's like a dead code. It does nothing literally. It just like creates objects and throws it away or something. So not the best thing to do. So how it actually should look like, we have a pipe and we only use the operator we want to use. Not implement unnecessary operators which don't do anything. And people, like when we were asking them, they were like, yeah, but I need to do this, like I need to put it there for it to work, but like, no, you don't. Just try it out, please, you know. Another thing is, where it actually is partially true, is once we want to execute the stream, we need to subscribe to a stream that's like starts the execution, and then there are like 3 possible handlers. And the truth is, like if you want to do like inline handlers, like you pass in 3 functions, so if you only want to listen to the complete event, you have to provide empty handler for next and error value. But again, if people would check the docs, instead of putting there like 3 functions as like a 3 arguments, we can put there an object with the only handler which we want. Again, it's not like a big thing, but it adds up. It adds up like in many files, many handlers, many executions, hundreds of lines of dead code just for nothing, which you have to read, you have to format, you make a mistake, whatever it is, which you have to understand. So yeah, please with RxJS also make sure that people like spend some time like to get to know it. There is now a very cool thing which they added to the RxJS website, which is kind of this feature was already on the older docs, but now they brought it again in the newer docs, and that's amazing. So it's kind of like the operator decision tree. So I have one example, observable, and I want to pick a property from each emitting value, and I need a pluck operator. So this is very cool for the beginners. I was using this a lot like when I first started working with RxJS in the older website, or I have some observables and I want to combine them as one observable, and I want the values, I want to be notified when all of them have completed, okay, I need fork join. So this can be pretty useful because it's like in plain words, it explains, okay, what do I want to achieve? And that's like this big topic. People should think, not just like, okay, I do it, but like, what do I actually want to achieve? What do I want to achieve, and not just like copy from, okay, this was here done like this. And that's also a big topic with the migration. If we just copy stuff, we didn't fix anything. We have to think like, what do we want to achieve? What is the most best way to achieve it in the new world? So yeah. Okay. So another thing, yeah, that's really like on the JavaScript level. So like the basic async. So yesterday, a colleague of mine sent me like a link to some like repository which had this code. So it was inside of some method of a service or something. So basically, what we do is we allocate the value, and then we call some service which is this RxJS observable. So of course it's async. It's kind of like glorified callback. So we take the first value and we subscribe to it, and then we assign a value which we already returned. So basically this happens now, this happens now, this happens in the future. So what did we return? Nothing. So, and you know, and somebody, you know, and that's like really, that's on that level that, okay, like that has nothing to do with RxJS. That could have been a callback, it's the same. Like I call the service, now it's executed. So if we are struggling with these kind of things, that's a problem. Because that's really like pure JavaScript, like understanding of what's asynchronous, and this kind of code makes it into the repositories. So again, yeah, we have a value that's sync, then we just return we call service, okay, and then we return this empty string, and then after we already exited, like we assigned something somewhere, so maybe it's even like a memory leak, basically. Yeah. Oh, that's probably just doing presentation too fast. Anyway, another thing is, yeah, the structuring of the projects. So already, like since many years, since AngularJS days, it was obvious that, okay, if you have a small application, we can have components together and services together, but as we keep adding features, it like gets extremely like confusing to navigate if somebody new comes to a project or something and we have like 50 components in a components folder and 30 services. How do they relate? Which belong together? Which we can rename? Which we can move? Okay, we have TypeScript, but still like it's a total mess. Let's say we want to make it like we want to extract part of the functionality into a library. That's a big problem. Like how do we do it? Now we can like go through files half a day just to like figure out like what belongs together. So since many years, the best way to structure projects is to structure it by feature. So if we have feature 1, and then we have all the components and all the services and all the integration services and whatnot, like pipes, and feature 2 and feature 3, or sub-feature 1, whatever it is, all the stuff which belongs together. Then, of course, also like with modularization, what happened, which was actually done very well in B2B Portal, they could just extract the whole folders with the subtrees. Okay, this is the library now. Okay, this works. So, but also in the new projects, like pure Angular projects, people still fall back to this like structuring by the like code type or like by the entity type. So that's really shouldn't be happening like after all these years, which we keep like talking about this. And the last one is, I would say, like this kind of like copy-paste development. So this is very relevant with now this migration from AngularJS to Angular. So yeah, we need to sometimes like provide like this functionality from AngularJS in Angular or something, and we just don't want to upgrade it, want to re-implement it. And then, okay, they start like by copying it and then like somehow bring it that it works, and then it's done. So I encountered, and yeah, okay, so just to speak a bit about it. So this migration is like an opportunity to improve everything, like the performance, whatever. So we are rewriting this old code like step by step during like applications are still deployed. That's amazing, that's good. But we should still not just like quickly do it, because then we end up where we have been, and that was kind of for nothing, and we still have these huge problems. So like right now is kind of this opportunity to improve stuff, or like just to make it more maintainable, more performant. So maybe it's like because of the pressure to quickly deliver a feature, like similar what you said, I don't know, but yeah, the feature teams are not really interested in like code quality or maintainability, or not really. So yeah, and to this example, so there was like this pull request which had this code, and it was because of something completely else. And it's just some code, and it's kind of hard to follow, and it's like how many 1, 2, 3, 4 methods, and they call like some feature toggle, and they do stuff with observables, like stuff which does nothing, and stuff like this, for example, does nothing, but some stuff does something, and like some, you know, it's kind of weird. And then I was like, okay, but this, what does this actually do? I was like really curious, like what does this actually do? So I took like a half an hour, like to untangle this, like what does this actually do? And what it actually does is not much. So all it does, it gets like a Boolean toggle and gives back one or the other string. But it looks like starting an aeroplane, like whatever. so, and I guess there is like a lot of this happening. I would be really not surprised if there is like really a lot of this happening. So if we kind of could try to like communicate to people whenever like we are supporting them, because it's okay, like of course everybody makes mistakes, they are under pressure, there's like stress, any reason. But we should try like to communicate to people in general all the time that like, and mainly now during this migration period, to really think about what does this should do, and just implement that. Like really think about what this part of code, this whatever it is, what this is supposed to do, and just make it simple. Because it's many times it's really simple. Like if there was this thought, like okay, what does this actually should do? At least that's how I imagining that this could, then maybe we get such a short implementation, and then when I need to do a fix halfway later, okay, I read it in 30 seconds and I fix it. But if I have to read this after half a year, then I spend 2 hours like, okay, so there is a loop, but actually I always call it with empty. So it's like, it's one-to-one. It's literally one-to-one, because all this logic here, it's kind of based on these parameters, but these are hard-coded and you never get anything else from top, and you are not supposed to get anything from top. So really, that's I think we can do a lot of good if we just always tell people like to take their time, think what is this feature actually doing, and just do that and not more. Yeah, so the summary is never use getters in Angular components. If you need derived data, use ng on changes, store it on the component. It's more performant, it's still very maintainable, it's like clean code, it's good. Yeah, try to improve the understanding of RxJS. People should spend some time, like now it's like the basic technology of the front end, so at least in the Angular world, and it's very powerful and it helps us solve stuff like much easier, but if we don't understand it, then we use it in weird ways, which can cause problems. Make sure that the basic asynchronous processing in JavaScript is well understood and support. Just people, whenever, like, everybody can learn, everybody can improve, that's all right. Structure projects by features, not by entity type, and please slow down and think about what we are implementing to prevent creation of instant ledges. Thank you for your attention. Please, questions.